You are listening to Draw 4 Podcast. Good tidings, and thanks for joining us. I am Joseph Dunlap. I'm the executive producer of Draw 4 Podcast, also a writer for manaleak.com/mtguk, and I enjoy standard brewing, modern brewing, fringe decks, all kinds of crazy shenanigans.
My name is Jared DeMartini. I am a local game store owner in Abilene, Texas, owner of The Gathering Place. I enjoy limited, sealed, and tiny leaders. It's not dead.
And my name's Ben Cotty. I'm in the United Kingdom. I also write for Manaleak, predominantly focused on my favourite format, which is Cube. I also play limited and standard during PPTQ seasons.
So obviously the topic on everyone's mind is Battle for Zendikar, recently released. And the pre-release wasn't too long ago, so maybe we could start off by sharing stories about our pre-releases. Jared, you had quite a few stories from pre-release tournaments at your particular store, The Gathering Place. And then Ben, I understand that you attended the pre-release way over the pond in the UK. So we have quite a wide range of experiences. I, unfortunately, was unable to attend the pre-release weekend. So Jared, why don't you start us? How was your pre-release?
You missed out on a good one. We had a great pre-release. We had a little over 50 people for midnight, and we had them going all the way through. And then for F&M this next week, we always do sealed on release week, and we had another 40 for sealed. So it was a ton of fun. I only got to play in one of them just due to the sheer volume of the size and the scope that we were trying to run. It was really interesting. One of the first things I noticed almost immediately, as did a lot of our more competitive players, was just how difficult it was to actually build the sealed pool itself, which I like that level of complexity, especially coming out of Origins, where it was a little bit easier, and rightfully so as a core set. I think that Battle for Zendikar was enjoyable in its complexity. There seemed like there was a lot that could be done, a lot of different angles, nothing jumped off the table at me. I found myself using almost all of my time, which is rare. I play a lot of limited and sealed in particular, so I wound up using a lot of my time, and I like that. I think that this is going to be a great limited format for that reason. Had a couple of great stories that happened. A guy I was playing against in the finals, he was ahead of me on board, and he just played Ugin's Sanctum card that if he casts a creature or a card converted mana cost 7 or greater, he gets to go search something up. And he casts the 8/9 trample guy on me and goes and searches for Desolation Twin to field 28 power on me in 2 turns.
Ouch.
So I got to go into chump mode because I had, after seeing some of these shenanigans, boarded into my Align Hedron Matrix, exiles all creatures power 5 or greater. And he landed the 28 power and just kind of looked at me as though, like, we're done here. And I said, no, let's keep going. And he's, okay. So I get in front of his 8/9 trample and get it off the board. Then he played a card to get it back onto his library so he could recast it. And then I continued to go into chump mode. Unfortunately, I could not find my Hedron Matrix, and he destroyed me. It was 3 cards down. But that was a lot of fun, too. Like, if I'm going to lose in the finals round, I want to lose with 28 power bearing down on me and all of my creatures just desperately getting in front trying to find my answer. I thought that was very enjoyable. We had quite a few laughs, and it was a really good time.
That 8/9 with Trample just seemed like an incredible limited card, considering it's a common.
It definitely did work. I got to play in release day as well. So there I finished 6-0 and won all my rounds there. I played Blue-White Tempo. I wanted to see how that went, and very powerful. That Clutch of the Currents and some of the other Bounce Awaken cards, very strong, very powerful. I think that there's definitely going to be a draft strategy around a Blue-White Awaken Tempo deck. I think that there's a lot of really good components for that. I think that having the pre-release kits just being packs helped people at the F&M seal that we did the following week, where it was also just packs. I think I like that better for better practice, especially if you're going to try to do this more competitively, to have experiences similar. Like, it's not a really good experience getting a seeded pack that's weighted to a certain color, because you're not going to see that in tournament play. So I think that the second time through and the third time through, as people played more sealed pools, they got a little more comfortable with what they were working with, and it made the games a little more fun.
Yeah, I was very much alongside you. I mean, obviously we've been used to these seeded packs, picking your colour, and with that lifeline removed, I especially saw a lot of the newer players struggling with what is a complex set, and then just getting your 6 boosters. but as a more sort of competitive player, it's much better preparation for PPTQ seasons. It's got the real sealed deck flavour to it, and I think the set itself would have been very difficult to put into different factions as well. So I'm not sure if they just did it this time because it didn't fit very well, or if this is how they're going to be moving forward. So that'll be interesting to see. Very much like you with the blue-white, I think flyers are always good in sealed, but especially in this one, there's a lot of scions around, there's lots of giant creatures, and just the 2/2 vanilla and 3/2 vanilla flyers in blue and white seemed really good for chipping away with the damage. I ended up going 4-0 in what was our biggest pre-release at 29 players ever, so I think the set's proving very popular. I had kind of a Boris X spells deck. Rolling Thunder is still just as good as it ever used to be, wiping boards away of troublesome creatures or just going to the dome as an X spell. And then I had the new Quarantine Field card, which I was quite often saving up until later and taking out 3 giant Eldrazi threats with. Luckily nobody destroyed it during combat, otherwise it could have all gone very badly. And my other big takeaway, I think, was that the land destruction spells seemed very, very good because Awaken was everywhere, and responding to some of the ones that don't actually have a target on them was a complete blowout with the instant speed removal spells on lands. It's the first time I think I've main decked 3 colourless and a red destroy target land at instant speed in sealed deck. I didn't see much of the synergies. It's a very synergistic set, but in sealed it was kind of all over the place and ended up not taking advantage of many of them except for Awakened. But then I participated in Two-Headed Giant the next day, and because we got to sort of combine our pools and build the 2 decks out of it, you began to see those synergies, especially the ingest processing, the Awaken together, the colourless matters types of things happening. It was really good to start seeing them before getting into Booster Draft.
So how did you do with the pre-release, Ben?
So I 4-0'd the first day, so it's a 4-round tournament, and then 4-0'd on the Two-Headed Giant as well. And not to spoil one of our upcoming topics, but we got very lucky with our shiny land pools from our pre-release sets, so it was a good weekend all round.
I'm glad you brought that up, but first, let's talk about expeditions and the expedition pool rates. Jared, I remember you were keeping tabs on the rates of expedition pools over at the Gathering Place.
Yeah, we have 2 locations, and we tried to monitor kind of how the drop rates went, mapping out kind of the cases as people, fill their pre-orders or as we open packs for our F&M sealed and things like that. We try to kind of track and see where the drop rates were, just loosely. It appears as though at least our count was about 1 out of every 4 boxes, and of all of the fat packs that we got, which are now all gone and may not come back into production, but that's a separate issue, we saw 2 opened out of fat packs, so that's a really good value to get 80 full art lands, 9 packs on an expedition for your $40 seems like a pretty good deal. But it looked like it was about 1 in 4 is what we saw. But judging by the prices as they're falling, it could be as much as 1 in 3. The prices for these expeditions do seem to be falling a little bit quicker than I would have expected.
I actually anticipated that yes, people are going to try and pre-order these expeditions for exorbitant prices because people aren't exactly that smart when it comes to pre-ordering things. Stop pre-ordering things, people. But I anticipated that the pull rate of expeditions and the fact that people were going to pull and pull and pull trying to find expeditions meant that the price was going to plummet. And ultimately, it's going to be about a year from now when we finally actually know what expeditions will settle at. At least that's my prediction. And it depends on the land. I'm expecting somewhere between 80 to 200. I'm not sure, though.
Something else that's interesting to watch as well is, surprisingly, the art was not as well received as I would have thought. So that may also, people like to pimp out and foil their decks as much as they can. Being a tiny leader player, I certainly understand that. And I've been keeping my eye on expeditions as well. However, I think that some of the art is lackluster, and as such, people may not be as jumpy for it, especially since it was kind of a gimmick anyway. Some people are kind of waiting. I think that's going to continue to depress values. But of course, all that's US. What are you seeing across the pond?
Yeah, so I would say 1 in 4 boxes seems about right. I was interested because over pre-release weekend, everybody that got one was taking photos on social media and posting about how lucky they got. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, I got very lucky, and within 3 of our pre-release packs that me and my wife, as my two-headed giant partner, opened over the week. We opened an expedition in each one. So we ended up with 3 of them from the weekend, and I did the sensible thing, which was ship them off as quickly as possible while they were an insane price, because I too knew that these would sort of come down in price. I think everybody seems shocked. They never said how common they would be. They just said they would be more common than a mythic rare foil. And because there's 25 of them, I think 1 in 4 boxes probably feels about right. And now as they're starting to hit the market, the prices are coming down. And I think they'll just keep coming down until around December, January, when the supply starts to dry up a little. But I think in 3 to 5 years' time, if you're really, really patient, they're just going to be worth lots of money, because they will be, in some ways, the sort of the most sought-after versions of the lands, even if they might technically not be as rare as some of the original Onslaught foils, for example. I agree. I don't think the art is as nice as it could have been. Like Hallowed Fountain and Misty Rainforest are kind of standouts. A lot of the others, especially the Shocklands, kind of blend into one. It's very difficult to tell if, that they're matching the colours they're supposed to represent. And they're definitely not full art lands. They're like extended borders at a stretch, but actually you don't get much more art to them than you get on a normal piece of card. So I think all the factors combined have really led to a quick drop in the prices, and I think that will continue for some time.
I think ultimately the intent may not have been to make something that was, desirable over all other iterations of said lands. I think it was more to make them more available to players, perhaps. And maybe that's why they didn't go all out with it and make it actual full arts or make the lands just so must-have. But we do need to move on, because briefly, I wanted to bring up something regarding the full art lands in Battle for Zendikar, because Ben, you recently wrote an article for Mana Leak about the whole situation regarding full art lands being in fat packs. Jared, I'm sure that you'll have something to contribute as well as an LGS owner.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of months ago, I sort of put on Twitter asking the question, were there going to be full art lands in the fat packs again as there were before, because it was going to inform partially my decision to purchase one or not. I don't always get fat packs. And Trick Jarrett from Wizards quite nicely replied and said yes, there would be, and that went very viral and got people very excited very quickly, because if you look at the price of full art lands and try and extrapolate them down to what these might be worth, and the fact that you now get 80 instead of 40 from the original Zendikar, it kind of, people were thinking, wow, this is just money in a box for me if I can get hold of these. And people went overboard. They were ordering these in the place of booster boxes, people putting in orders for 20, 30, 40, and also retailers, but like on eBay saying, yes, we will have these many. And just generally speaking, as it went through the chain, the retailers realised there was a huge amount of orders. The distributors realised. Wizards must have realised it was going to happen. But the communication about the fact that there wouldn't be enough fat packs to meet this insane demand didn't seem to make its way back around, and it ended up then very close to release, like a week or so away, that retailers had to suddenly start cancelling orders from people or finding a way to redistribute these out. And Wizards have always been very tetchy about this, of not telling people how much of a product's going to be available, and also doing print runs based on how the sets before have been selling. They don't seem to take into account the fact that this was going to drive a huge demand. So basically you ended up with a lot of disappointed people, a lot of retailers feeling very sad that they weren't able to live up to their orders from their customers, and then lots of disappointed people that maybe just wanted one fat pack, finding they couldn't get one because somebody had gone and bought 30 of them, trying to make a quick buck by reselling them for more than the sort of the retail price. Australia seemed to have got hit very badly in terms of Battle for Zendikar product. Europe definitely got hit badly with it. It was difficult to see through all the fog whether there was less available than before, or whether it was just people not getting as many as they hoped to get. And this is probably where Jared can step in a little bit, I guess. There was a feeling around the rest of the world that maybe the fat packs that were available were being siphoned towards the US to try and to sort of satisfy the core market. So it just ended up with a lot of very disappointed people in the end.
Certainly. Well, it was interesting. This is the first time in 4 years that product has been cut off by Wizards during the pre-order period for retailers. It's also the first time in waking memory that I can remember that a restock of these items was not available after release week. At this time, U.S. retailers are not able to order fat packs. We will see on Friday if that is the case. I think that this does a couple of things. I believe that, and to link back into the Expedition pull rates, I think that this was excellently and brilliantly done by Wizards to create hype. What Wizards has done is created a market scarcity. As such, it's generated more interest than perhaps launches of other sets, and makes people want to get these packs and play more. Ultimately, from a retail perspective, I think that that's going to lead to more overall growth, but it's interesting. I think that this was a little bit by design. Wizards knew how popular these would be. In addition, I think that they could have printed more, but they cut the orders off early. They made these expeditions drop at a slightly higher rate to generate the enthusiasm of getting your hands on Battle for Zendikar and opening it. And I think it did that. We also very quickly sold out of fat packs and saw people, both in some of our cities and across the country, gouge prices higher than they normally would be for these fat packs. I think that a couple online retailers were at $55 and $60. So they've ratcheted up the price based on demand. That's, of course, a business decision. So we're still waiting to see what Wizards is going to restock with, but everybody, at least domestically, is out of these, including all distribution outlets.
Let's move on to talk about some standard. What Battle for Zendikar cards do we anticipate will have the biggest impact on the standard format, possibly even Eternal formats? We're not talking synergy necessarily, as it's obvious that Allies, Landfall, Eldrazi Scions maybe, Ingest, Awaken, maybe even Devoid will have a strong presence in standard, especially when we get Oath of the Gatewatch. So I'll go ahead and start here. Definitely Gideon is going to be a big thing.
Yes, Gideon was my pre-order for the set, which I know you shouldn't do, but still, when a card you can see is most obviously going to be cast in anything that can generate 2 white on turn 4, be it control, mid-range, or aggro, where I think he's at his best, I can see myself playing with this card for the next 18 months, so I had no qualms about stumping up the money ahead to get the use out of him. I think he's overinflated in price at the moment, definitely, because of how much the set's going to be opened, and that'll go for every card. But the spot on every single board state you could potentially cast him, he's going to be so good for you. He immediately presents 2 threats, which is the Planeswalker that can turn into a creature, as well as the token that he's usually producing when he comes down. You just don't need to have much card evaluation skills as a Magic player to know that he is just raw power.
Gideon's going to be a really good card for this set. It just goes into some of the archetypes that are already strong. It does everything that you want. It's good quick, it's good mid-game, it has some late-game aspects to it. This guy is good, and I think that Wizards had a good flavor hit with this, making Gideon a card that, pushing it down to 4 mana instead of 5, pushing it from 3 loyalty to 4, to get this card into play, to bring a good face of the story to competitive play.
Next card on my list was actually Green Warden of Murasa. Not Mufasa, but Murasa, because I actually see it interacting well with Megamorph, since we'll have Megamorph in the format for another 6 months.
Yeah, this is like Big Daddy Den Protector. It's the largest Eternal Witness the world has ever seen.
This card's really good about getting an 8/9 trample Eldrazi back and sealed after you just landed a Desolation Twin. This is how my opponent got their card back.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So this was Deadwood Treefolk is another harken back memory to this type of card, where back in Planar Chaos, where it was a 3/6, this is a 5/4, so it brings a little more of the beats and it doesn't vanish away. This card's going to be something.
Transgress the Mind. A 2-mana Devoid that's the opposite of Inquisition of Kozilek. Converted mana cost 3 or higher with an exile effect, and it hits a lot of Battle for Zendikar.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see this become part of the meta to answer to all the graveyard interactions. Ulabog, the Ceaseless Hunger. I mean, seriously, all you have to do is cast this thing and you're probably ahead in the game.
Yeah, we didn't see it sort of come out at the past weekend at SCG, but I think this will be one of the big players at the Pro Tour. They want their big story cards to be good and playable. This is the big bad of the set. You cast him on most board states, you will win. It's just the big game, and yeah, I expected to see play.
My next card is actually March from the Tomb.
Now, I think R&D was wise to make this cost 5 mana. I think that that's going to wind up being too much. Allies is a very interesting synergy. There's a lot going on with it, but there aren't a lot of power and toughness bumps like you saw back in Rise. I'll be interested to see if the synergy overcomes the sheer power of what Allies could have been with bigger pluses. I'm not sure. I think 5 is going to be a little high.
Yeah, and it might take the Oath of the Gatewatch. It might take us to see some more Allies that do some, I guess, better things than the current ones do, because they don't stack very well, the current ones, adding lifelink or indestructible. So maybe we need the other set to really bust them out.
I was kind of thinking that as well, that we really need the other set to get the full picture of what was intended. Kind of like with Heroic in the Theros block. My last thing is the 2 man lands. Lumbering Falls, and Shambling Vent. Easily playable, hexproof or lifelink on a land is just great, but the question here is, which one is better? Or, I guess I should ask, which do you guys prefer?
I think my favourite will probably be Lumbering Falls, because I see the potential to use the Awaken spells, such as Scatters of the Winds, to put counters on it, and then produce a huge hexproof creature that will turn off the removal that you didn't want to hit your creatures in the first place. I think probably Shambling Vent will have an initial impact because of it being in the Abzan colours, but I think I prefer Lumbering Falls overall.
Yeah, I think that for Standard, I believe Lumbering Falls will be better. Looking a little bit further down at Modern, I don't think you're going to see Lumbering Falls show up much. You may see Shambling Vent in tokens as a way to try to force in some little bit of damage or tip the scale. But I think both are going to be at least tried in the current Standard format.
Okay, Ben, I know that you had a list of cards, so I'm going to give you 60 seconds on the clock. Go.
Sure, so the ones I had were Cura, which I kind of just see as the second coming of Garrett Wildspeaker with her +1, not to mention the shenanigans with Jace, and then the -2 in a Delve world feels a bit like a draw to add 2 mana to a certain extent. More difficult to place than, say, Gideon, because it's 2 colours, but definitely I think will have time to shine. Bring to Light, aka Rhinos 5 to 8, as we've seen over the weekend. Could do a lot of different things, but I think once people get used to 5 mana sorceries, they might be able to take that out. And then I suppose the last one is Drana, which could revive Black Aggro. She's great on her own, but with a 1 and 2 drop into her and then a haste creature, your opponent's just dead if they don't have the removal.
Jared, did you have a few?
Yeah, I have a few that could show up just quickly. I think that Bring to Light is going to be a huge force in Standard. It's been a while since players have had this good of a tutor. So I think that we're going to see that card pop up. I know that some modern decks have already tried to play Retreat to Coral Helm to ramp up the Knight of the Reliquary. We'll see if that actually becomes a thing, but I see it's kind of being played there. I think Blighted Woodland may make a small appearance in Scapeshift as a way to produce a few extra lands if you don't need the Cryptic Command or something on your pivotal turn. So I think that that'll be interesting to watch those as well. I think that the Tangle lands aren't going to see a lot of play in Standard, surprisingly, which makes me sad. I like seeing 2 color sources on a land. That always makes me happy as a limited player, but I don't know if those are going to pop up much in Standard. When we get the blue-red one, I think that may make an appearance in Splinter Twin in place of the Sulphur Falls. But we'll watch those in Modern and see. I don't know if they're going to slide in.
I actually do agree with you on that it might see play in Twin. But before we wrap up on such an excellent first episode, it's time for the Battle for Zendikar Lightning Round. Here's how it will go. I will ask a question about specific cards from Battle for Zendikar, and you will each get a maximum of 15 seconds to answer the question, then we'll move on to the next question. What we'll do is we'll have Jared answer, then we'll have Ben answer. 15 seconds on the clock is all you get. While most of the questions I prepared are geared more towards experienced players, some are intended more for less seasoned players. So my first question in the lightning round is, how can Dragon Master Outcast be abused?
Ojutai's Command is the only thing that I can think of. You play it early, chump, use Ojutai's Command to return it to the battlefield at instant speed, end of turn, draw yourself a card, get yourself a 5/5 at the untapped step at your upkeep. I think that's the only way we're going to see this guy really get abused.
Yeah, I think we already saw a bit of that at the weekend. I fully agree. You need to kind of cheat him in that kind of way. I think just running him out there and hoping to get up to 6 mana is not the way to go.
Okay, next question. How many Quarantine Fields would you personally run in a deck, and would Archetype affect that?
I'm going to say 1 in Sealed. Had 1 in Sealed, it was great. I'm going to say 0 in everything else. For the mana that you're paying for this card, it's just not good enough. You can play Ruinous Path or Languish, get virtually the same effect for less mana. At Quarantine Field, I think it's going to be too oppressive on the mana cost.
Yeah, I think unless you're ramping, it's not going to be useful, and even then I think it might be a 1 or 2 of coming out of the sideboard as games get grindier after board. But against Ramoka's Command, it's such a blowout if it dies, so it could be just too much of a liability.
Next question. Should Drana, Liberator of Malakir, flying first strike, gives itself counters as an ally, have lifelink instead of first strike?
No, R&D knows what it's doing. I think they did this one correct. I think this is a big flavor win as well. Liberator getting in, buffing your team to help liberate them and continue fighting. I think that was a good flavor win.
Yeah, I like how this is a combination of the old Drana and like Vampire Nighthawk, harkening back to that with the 2/3 stats, and the way the first strike works with the rules and you dealing your damage during the first strike step and then adding the +1/+1 to your other creatures who then do the damage straight away. I think it's just a pure win all over with the design.
Next question, how many of the, quote, retreat cycle cards, the landfall enchantments, are standard playable?
I think that Retreat to Valakut, the red one, +2/+0 till end of turn, or target creature can't block, is great with a fetch land, maybe in hyper aggression. The black land, I think, is just not too impactful. I don't think the other ones are impactful enough for what you're doing to warrant a card slot. The cards are just too powerful in standard.
Yeah, I agree. I think the blue one might have a chance as a value card. The red one is slightly awkward because you're not playing a threat, and then you might not have that many lands left to play after it. They're the only two I could see having play, but I'm not sure they'll make it.
What spells would you most like to cast targeting Zada, Hedron Grinder?
Anything that draws a card, like Refocus or Defiant Strike, anything that's power advancing, like Become Immense or Butcher's Glee, all your creatures get +3/+0 lifelink and regenerate, that seems alright. Or Arc Bond. I'll let you look at Arc Bond and let you start doing the math. Ben, I'm sure you can do the math on that and see that a lot of games could end in a draw if we play Arc Bond.
Yeah, that's definitely something that could happen. I'm hoping that won't start happening. I want to be targeting things that are 1 mana and draw you multiple cards. It's nice being able to cast Ancestral Recall, so like Twisted Image maybe even in the modern formats might be nice. Yeah, that's the main thing I want to be doing, I think, is card draw spells on this.
Okay, next question. How do you feel about the 2-drop replacements for Sylvan Caryatid, because there's multiples of them, and the lack of 1-drop mana dorks in the format? What about Eldrazi Scions? What do you think of those?
I don't think there's a replacement to Caryatid just because it can stonewall an opponent and it can't be killed. The Scions, I think, are going to be a lot better in Swarm than Ramp. I don't want to sacrifice 4 power worth of creatures to put out a threat that's going to get killed because everyone's playing removal. I don't think that there is a replacement for Caryatid. I think that everything here is decidedly a little worse. I think that they're pushing the format a little bit longer.
Rattleclaw Mystic is obviously the best one left over. It's interesting that and Leaf Gilder are both 2/1s, so maybe the ramp decks will have a slightly more aggressive feel to them, more mid-rangey, so they can actually get in with the 2 damage matters.
Okay, next question. Just how good is Vampiric Rites? Is it standard playable? What about Eterna formats? Or is it just strictly worse than Viscera because of the combo potential?
I had to go deep and ask some of our players about this one. I was a little bit down on it, but a lot of them feel that Vampiric Rites could be playable in Standard to use, but particularly against Control. If you're not playing Evolutionary Leap, for some reason you're not in green, then I think this could crop up, but I don't believe this is better than Leap, and I don't think you want 2 of these effects in your deck.
Yeah, I could see it having a sort of Erebos, the Black God from Theros block kind of effect in the sideboard for the attrition games, to draw you more cards. I'm along with the Sam Black side of thinking that I think this is a very powerful effect. I could definitely see myself trying it out. Whether it'll get there is debatable.
Next one is Wasteland Strangler as good as it seems? 3 CMC gives a creature -3/-3 when it hits the battlefield as long as you can take an exiled card into your opponent's graveyard.
I'm way down on this card. I don't think this is good at all. Skin Renderer was the last card that we saw that really had this effect at 2 black for a 3/3. You save 1 mana here. A 3/2 is just not that impactful. I don't want to give my opponent access back to a card that I've already exiled some way. I just think this is going to be a high setup cost. I don't think this is good enough.
Yeah, I think this might depend on the card that we looked at earlier, the new Inquisition of Kozilek, Transfix the Mind. If that is a main deck playable card and you can play that into a Wasteland Strangler on curve, and there are enough early creatures to hit, which most decks are playing a Jace or a Hangerback Walker now, it's got some potential. It's definitely there on raw power. It's whether you can activate it and whether there are enough early targets for it in enough decks.
We're going to move on. This is our final question. And that is, you were talking about Bring to Light basically being Siege Rhinos number 5 through 8. And Bring to Light is currently worth just under $7 or £4.50 British pounds, or at least it was when I wrote this up. What do you think that price will be in, say, 2 months' time?
2 months is hard to say. I think this card's going to see a ton of play at the Pro Tour. I believe this card will go from 7 to 12 overnight. I think that we'll see almost twice again. Tutoring is just really good. People want to tutor. Tutoring in Standard is very good. I think that this price is going to go up before it goes down. Now, in 2 months, of course, everything can adjust out. Prices can be very fluid in Standard. But I do think that this is going to jump.
Yeah, and I would agree that I think short term it's up. I think if in a 2 month timescale, I think you've got to say it's going to be less, because I think the whole of this set will price crash because so much is being opened.
I concur.
Its long-term price, I think, depends on its viability in something like Scapeshift or something in Modern being able to abuse it.
I agree that as soon as the Pro Tour happens and everyone's playing it, it's going to jump overnight, like Jared said. But I think the fact that people are opening up boxes and creating an imbalance between supply and demand is only going to have a short-term effect. Actually, would guess that once people have the cards they want, then the cards that remain are the cards that are being bought. So I would guess that Bring to Light's going to be one of those cards that's going to jump in price every time there's a set that comes out in Standard that people want to use Bring to Light with. For example, when Sylvan Caryatid jumped in price with the release of Khans.
I think that Zendikar is going to be very interesting price-wise. This is going to be a big win for retailers at the initial retail outlet level, but a big letdown on the secondary market. A lot of cards are getting opened. In addition, a lot of cards are getting cycled. People will open a box, look for their Expedition, look for their foil, look for Gideon, Drana. Is it not there? Here are these cards I have. What can I get for them in trade? Dump them, turn it into another box, open it up, repeat the process. And then with just global shortages on this due to all the hunting for these chase expeditions, I think that the overall values of this set's going to be very depressed. I actually think that's intentional by Wizards to bring more people to the game at a lower price point.
It's a big win for everybody when Eternal players get to pick up these nice lands and then Standard players get relatively cheap staples.
It's about time that we call it a night and say farewell to our audience. I'll let you guys say your goodbyes first.
You've been listening to Draw 4 Podcast. I've been really happy to have been here. I wish it all the success moving forward. And until next time, have a good time.
This is Jared for Draw 4 Podcast. I've had a wonderful time speaking with all of you, and I hope that your value is always on top.
This has been Draw 4 Podcast. Until next time, we wish you good fortune, and may you draw well.